Hello, time for an edition of the Thought Project. Just so you know, this will be the third episode for August 2023. We're knocking them out real quick this month, and this may be only one of two episodes this week. We'll see how it goes, what I have time for. But this is definitely an explicit episode, and I'm going to be starting with Missy Elliott's old song, She's a Bitch. So you've been warned.
To the MI, cat like a semi. Niggas know my car once you get mine. Give your ass a black eye. Oh, say bye bye. I'ma get your body to the sky. Run through your clip. Nigga, you pissed, don't trip. I'ma have to bust you with your lips. And the whips, better have a whole lot of chips. Cause I ain't for no nigga giving tips. She's a bitch. When you say my name, talk more jump, but won't look my way. Cause bitch, see, I got more cheese. So back on up while I roll up my sleeve. She's a bitch. Can't see me, Joe. Get on down while I shoot my flow. She's a bitch. When I do my thing, got the place on fire, burning down the flame. Roll up in my car, don't stop, won't stop. I'ma keep it rocking to the clock on top. I'ma keep it hot like my ass on fire. I'ma grab a Philly, go and roll it at the bar. What you talk, what you say, huh? Gotta flow, gotta move it slow, huh? Better you running out the door, huh? Gonna be a long lost soul, what you say? Yippee-yi-yo, yippee-yi-yi-yay. Put me on stage, watch your niggas spin.
Okay, so that's enough for today. Just starting with Missy Elliott there and her old song, She's a Bitch. I miss Missy Elliott. And I'm really glad she took time to lose weight, actually. I know she was really overweight, and then for health reasons, she chose to lose weight. Much like I chose to lose weight for health reasons. So, anyways, and today's a special episode. We're going to go through some history on Al Capone, but I'm going to start with a few other pieces of news that are actually relevant this week, just some current issues. I talked about the Russian mafia and China and the CCP and the integration of the Russian mafia with the Russian government and the way they work with the CCP. This week on Monday, and I saw the news this literally 4 hours before the U.S. government ended up sending home all the federal workers 2 hours early. So I saw the news at like 2, it had been posted 4 hours earlier. There were ships from Russia and China at the Aleutian Islands. As you know, looking at maps of the North America and the U.S., our land in Alaska is not that far from Russia. And I know there's been jokes made about it, but I mean, I've even made the joke that some of these Russians that you find over here in the U.S., especially these tiny little petite girls, your little blonde, blue-eyed things, or sometimes they either are black, that show up here and are crazy and just want to disrupt your office or disrupt your business or just cause havoc, and you can kind of spot them because they don't really speak English. There's a lot of, huh, what, and sometimes they want things repeated, I used to run into people like that in the D.C. area, though some of those were just plain government employees and people from other groups that turn out later to have Russian ancestry. But they have a big thing with wanting everything repeated all the time because they think it's all being recorded, and as if everyone repeating it somehow meant something. Well, it does in Russian legal systems. It really doesn't in the U.S. And that's kind of important to note because this week there were ships from Russia and China up around those islands. And, I go through that whole loop on the story just to give you some context. Because both Alaskan senators were briefed on the issue, U.S. Senator Dan Sullivan and U.S. Senator Lisa Murkowski. And it was actually Dan Sullivan who stepped up and said that he wanted the U.S. to make a stronger response because there were problems with those ships circulating around those islands last summer from China and Russia. So they were practicing. And the U.S. responded by sending up 4 Navy destroyers really quickly. So the reality at this point for the U.S. is that there's a fair number of people actually of Russian ancestry or are actually Russian themselves that have come here or even working with the CCP, come here to start trouble. And they've gotten used to what was a more lax response in the past, what we just don't have anymore or even have time for. And especially not even with those islands. Who cares how close they are together? You have the Bering Strait up there. The response just isn't going to be that lax anymore. And it really isn't even to them in the workplace or businesses, etc. I think there was an article out in the late 2010s talking about how this massive majority of Americans were actually spies for China or Russia. And it was so much higher than anyone had wanted to hear or even realize. That came out in one of the business magazines. And that's when people went, wow, the government's kind of behind the issue, but the rest of us culturally got to make some changes because this has to stop. So point is the U.S. responded with a lot of strength, with a lot of varying strength there. I'm just kidding. No, they sent 4 Navy destroyers up there. So that put an end to the issue. But it was also the same day that the U.S. government claimed there was a storm coming and that they evacuated from their offices early in D.C. So I have no idea if there was a correlation because I talked to people down in the D.C. area online and they said that there was an actual storm. Some of them had problems with their power. But you know how those things kind of can be configured, especially if you worked in Intel or having understanding of what's going on with global weather patterns. It's a little weird that these ships were over here preparing to do something. We had to respond, and then the capital area has to be evacuated, all within the same few hours. So, anyways, I would like to note that the show and Deborah K. Media is now featured on a website called thousandfinancial.com. It features a lot of local organizations as well in Michigan, insurance, sales representatives, banks, the Farm Bureau. They're all featured on the website now, but I have my own page on it. It was made for me, so I appreciate the person who made it. Would thank them. They are running ads for the Sex and the City reboot on it, which is kind of funny. So, because it says something about my demographics that apparently people who like to watch the reboot of Sex and the City also like my show. So, anyways, that's that. And we need to note something else. Just a minority leader, who's right now the minority, he has been the majority a number of times, Mitch McConnell, does have a problem. He's being booed at and told to not run for office anymore because he's old down in his home state. But here's the issue, and I'm just going to look up some statistics here to see if it kind of helps play things out for you. But I'm just going to tell you the truth about what's wrong with McConnell. It isn't just that he's old. It's because a lot of them are older. You know, he's from Kentucky, and let's see, right now the whip is John Thune. And he's had a lot of judicial nominations. Yeah, it was just yesterday that he was heckled and asked to retire. So, here's what's really going on. There was a woman who went to Luther College. I'm just going to tell you this because I'm tired of all of it. I already discussed it all with the federal government for years. I'm tired. And she was supposed to be someone that helped with a Swiss Miss. She'd been a roommate. She said, "You can go, Deborah. I'll take care of it. You can go. Whatever." Complete bull. P.S. Here's the thing. I know just because I swore, there's this opening song where someone swore. And I was like, dancing here doesn't mean we're going to swear throughout the whole show. We're not going there. But, you know, it's BS. Because she actually was his office manager and stayed with him for a long time. I think she's still working there. She's Iranian and she's extremely radical and has been responsible for a lot of problems with policy issues around labor and some of the school, you know, the problems with the school setups that happened under the former president and former vice president, and which we've already discussed in previous episodes. So I'm not going to keep repeating everything for you. You know, that's why I say take notes, take a notebook, write it all down, make charts. But I think she's still in his office. So what he's going to have to do is fire her. And that might be a little bit dangerous. I'm not going to kid you, because she is Iranian, and the Iranians are extremely difficult to deal with. I had asked years ago in my 20s, are they just aggressive, hostile? What's the problem? And I was talking to somebody who worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency about it, because I couldn't understand what the issue was. Like, we deal with hostile weirdos all the time. Well, no. The problem with the Iranians is that, much like the Russians, at least as far as their more hostile government goes, is that they tend to be very disassociative and very symbolic. And they can even act like they're behaving nicely or okay, but it's just like some kind of bizarre weaving around strange logic that makes no sense. And the longer I've known about all of it, because I dealt with so many trafficking issues tied to the Russian mafia, I thought, well, it makes more sense, but actually over time it made less sense, because it appears to be meaningless and like useless. But to them, everything means something. And I don't recommend going more deeply into understanding their culture. After everything I saw, I figured out as much as anyone wanted to know. I came to understand that those Zoroastrians actually play a larger role in their country than the Muslims do. And the Zoroastrians are very big on fire and burning people. And some of these really weird abuse cases you hear where the women are just completely scarred up and burned are from the Zoroastrians. And it's not just the Muslims there. It's kind of rude to say it's a Muslim population issue in that country. And the Zoroastrians are so bizarre that the men actually think having them scarred up and burned is a mark of beauty for them, because even though it's extremely painful for the women. I'm just giving you an example of something that's hard for anyone to understand and it seems horrible and backward. So the point is that I do remember her behavior. She was not a nice person. And she was extremely misogynistic and weird towards other women. You know, if you weren't Iranian or Russian, she just had no respect for you. And would look women up and down if they were attractive at all and just thought they should all be slaves. Really. And McConnell's had her in the office since the 2000s. Like, she was literally a year ahead of me at Luther. I hardly knew her, but I know when she got out to DC that it's a problem. Girlfriend's got to go. Got to fire her. McConnell can keep his seat, but he's going to have to fire her. If he doesn't fire her, he's not going to keep the seat. That's how it works. Ooh, do my earrings need to be changed around? Let's see. This is just kind of basic stuff, guys. You know, you got a weird chick working for Russia in the Senate. You got another one that's Iranian in the Senate. You know, the Republican Party is usually pretty good about them stuff. But sometimes they're not. And we've had to work really hard. I remember when I was in the party, we worked so hard to try to clean things up. It also became exhausting. I had to go live the rest of my life, you know. Just because I was versed in the issues. You know, I did what I had to do for a long time, and I was happy to do it, but then I had to move on because I had to work on making a living. I had to survive all this dumb stuff. There's a lot of dumb stuff going on. By the way, the woman in Arlington County, the little blonde, blue-eyed thing that was so nasty that kept killing all the women and was so threatening to me, was Iranian, part of the Russian mafia, extremely nasty, threw tantrums all over the place. Part of the problems we had in the DC area before I left is we had a bunch of people who were crazy and throwing tantrums over wanting to sexually abuse kids and sell them, and organ trafficking, and just wanting to ruin other people's lives. And they just sit around and laugh, and how any of them ever got government jobs, I don't know. By the way, when I dealt with those 4 crazy women at Arlington County, one of them was so nuts that she would masturbate in front of customers. So they would come into the economic development office in Arlington and want help, and she was so nuts she'd masturbate. And they had this other crazy woman there who was Iranian that was screaming and yelling at women and trying to plot to kill them. And she really has gone ahead and killed people. Thought everyone was just supposed to be trafficked. Apparently we don't have any rights or something in the U.S. It was just bizarre. And she argued with me for hours about her right to traffic people. It was completely insane. So yeah, gotta get the one out of the office in Arlington County. Gotta fire the one in Mitch McConnell's office. Are there decent Iranians in the world? I'm sure there are some. I'm sure I've met some, but there is a definite problem with the one side of their actual government being way too aggressive and crazy. And it isn't an issue of just simply managing people who are hostile. They're really out there, and they really have no interest in listening at all. And a lot of times they act like children. It's really, really strange. You know, as I jokingly said on Facebook earlier this week, I had people asking me for free pictures for my OnlyFans, and they said I noted for people on Facebook, they acted and sounded like children online and were asking for things for free. And I said, gotta be careful with people that act like kids and ask for things for free, because they're probably really dangerous, okay? We also need to go through a story of a woman that worked at the State Department. I know this is hard to deal with, but she actually got fired, but she's still free in the U.S. And we have to go through this because they're saying Wilhelm is still free. The woman in Arlington County is still free. You got the chick over in McConnell's office. You got Cersei and Wilhelm are free. People, what is going on? And this spins around to the fact that there has been a huge problem with the FBI, and that's why they were downsized and their role was changed. But I used to have arguments where I'd say, do your job. And they'd scream, they go, no, you're doing your job. Well, their job was actually to catch criminals. It's actually their job to arrest out-of-control Iranians and detain them or send them home, make sure they don't come back. It was their job to arrest out-of-control Russian mafia. It was their job to put a stop to rape rings around the D.C. area. It was not their job to threaten me or threaten to have me beat up, because God only knows I survived a really nasty assault in 2019 that a lot of women have not survived. It was their job to put a stop to the branding of government employees who were women. And other women like myself who are private citizens having to be witnesses. They didn't want to do that. They actually had their agents hanging out in a DC Hilton in the early 2000s and were ordering women up who had been abused or were trafficked or caught or in some other weird situation with the Russian mafia, like hotcakes to eat or sandwiches. What? No. So that's why the FBI has been downsized and they're no longer the hugely responsible large organization that they once were. And I laugh because I still see a few of their people who have completely messed up everything they've ever been asked to manage, trying to testify in front of Congress as if they had any right to talk to anyone. It's weird. Stop it. Yeah. I'm going to go into a story about Australia, which is actually sort of uplifting. Australia just arrested 19 men for the sexual abuse of kids. They were using a dark internet service. And by dark web or dark internet... Oh, I dropped my pen. dark web, dark internet service. What I mean is, it's literally a private internet system that is blocked from the open web. So you can't Google for it. You can't type the address in. It's all encrypted, secured, and that's actually how a lot of these perverts are operating, and they're operating internationally with it, sending pictures back and forth, gratuitous material. Okay, so Australia got really fed up. Their federal police operations went ahead and, or they're calling it the federal police Operation Bakis, but basically there were 2 FBI agents, so those are our people, were shot in 2021 or 2020, and over efforts to stop the ring here in the U.S. and Florida. And the total number of arrests at this point by the Australian police is 98. And the ring actually goes all the way from Australia over to Sunrise, Florida. It involves the use of so-called dark web. I'm just reading quotes from the article. They were shopping pictures of the people abusing these kids, the ring, to each other, which is even more bizarre. And I have to note this. It was actually the Australians group, the center, their Center on Child Exploitation. The FBI had worked with them a little bit. I don't believe the FBI did very much with this because our FBI has become so weak and just weird and don't handle anything really anymore. I just got too fed up with them. I couldn't deal with it. And of course we have DHS now here in the US. So I'm not really sure why DHS wasn't involved in this. But what you're talking about is that essentially, I'll look this up again. The Australians came to our aid on a massive international sex ring with men trafficking pictures of kids and trafficking children. And stuff that's disgusting. Just really gross stuff. Yeah, I just don't believe it. So 2 FBI agents were killed. 2021, yeah. And there's been up to 79 arrests. They're calling it joint operation. I'm going to be honest, our FBI really isn't that good, honey. They've just let too many perverts go free. I stopped having any faith in them. So that's basically that we were having problems and Australia came to our aid. So thank you, Australia, for lending us a hand and sending their resources to help us. Oh my gosh. It's like almost enough to make you cry. But anyways, oh, and by the way, the Australians really like watching my show. So that's one of my big groups that watches. I got the US, Australia, India, really big fans. So, no, I got so fed up with the FBI in the early 2000s. I did a meeting with them to try to get a settlement over some things I'd gone through. And they told me that only prostitutes get settlements. So that means literally every woman you've ever met who had a settlement from the FBI is some kind of a prostitute. Which is really weird concerning in light of recent events. Just telling you, like, they're saying that every single woman who's ever got a settlement for them is a prostitute. They were all ordered and told to go work as prostitutes, which is illegal. You cannot tell somebody to work as a prostitute in the U.S. Prostitution is illegal. You cannot work as one. And more importantly, federal employees really can't order people to work as prostitutes or make porns or anything else disgusting. Yeah, so these people really need to keep their mouths shut. Just not work at all. They belong in psychiatric hospitals. And they're going to be opening a new one soon up here in Michigan, so maybe we'll put some of them in it, but I'm tired of it. Wow. We're getting into the story of Al Capone in a minute. This will be a little longer show, but I want to note Disney has lost $900 million this summer despite some successes with Sound of Freedom, according to different sources. And Warner Brothers lost $3 million so far within the last month on their Barbie film, which is supposed to be, there's some weird press going around saying that it's made $1 billion around the world. I don't think so. South Korea blocked the film, Vietnam blocked the film, pretty much everybody that doesn't like Chinese propaganda has blocked the film. It was made originally by people in the Russian mafia who were working for the CCP. I know about this because of my time at Luther College, so I knew where the film came from. It came from abject communist Nazis that just like to mess with kids. I wouldn't take anybody to see it, actually. And I doubt it's made $1 billion because there's already been a huge loss here. You have to look at people's net loss and net gain. And you should also expect some of this because the agency that manages some of the actors and actresses in the film is one that has a huge amount of debt and keeps trying to pretend like it's successful. It's not. So, anyways, So I'm going to go through the story of Al Capone. He was born in 1899, January 17th, Brooklyn, New York, and he died January 25th, 1947 in Miami, Florida. And he spent 11 years in prison. And what he was originally arrested for in the end was actually prohibition. He was arrested by a prohibition agent named Elliot Ness. And he's part of a group that was nicknamed the Untouchables. And I did look at a bunch of different sources on this. He was convicted on tax evasion issues around prohibition. So because he was doing prohibition, he wasn't reporting on his taxes, and he got arrested. What do you really get in trouble for? Well, the thing about Al Capone, as far as I knew, because I grew up in Dubuque, Iowa, part of my life. It was my whole life, thank God. It was a horrible place. But I don't recommend visiting it ever. But what they told me when I was growing up there and I was dealing with Cersei and Wilhelm, who were not my parents, and I was stuck there, is that they believed firmly, some of the older people did, who had known Capone, because this was the 80s, so there were people around who actually knew him as kids. Or, they're in their 60s and they knew him when they're 20s, right? So, or 70s and knew him when they're like teens, 20s, whatever. The thing is that they said he would never put up with the behavior of Cersei and Wilhelm, which the U.S. government has put up with and even protected them in some cases, which is just wrong. There's no reason for the two of them to be free in the U.S. today. And that's why I'm doing the show, is because this thing with the Russian mafia being allowed to traffic kids and even rape people in public has become an actual epidemic. And Wilhelm went up and started raping a waitress once in Dubuque. We'd finished dinner. He wanted to pay for it. She brought the bill, so he just started attacking her and raping her, and she fought him off. And so the restaurant came and helped her to get him off her. But he said, I'm not paying until you go to court to testify against me. What? And he did actually end up going to court for it. But in Iowa, they failed to keep him in any kind of prison. They failed to put him away. They failed to convict him, despite multiple hostile, violent attacks on women and children, and even in public. By the way, Dubuque was so crazy when I was a kid that there were women who'd actually stand in a certain section of the mall and sell their kids for sex for the day to people. Like literally an old-fashioned style slave market like they had in ancient Rome. Okay? This went on in the U.S. I have no idea if it's even been shut down today. You might be able to still drive over to Dubuque. I would find it. I wish a news crew would go over there and film it. Excuse me if I was like burping a little bit during that. But, I'd love it if someone would go over there and actually do an expose on them. Because I saw an article last year about a little girl who'd been kept for 7 or 8 years as a prisoner and was being raped the whole time. I just started crying. I thought, oh, that state's never changed. Still a disgusting, weird town. And the rest of the state is still turning a blind eye to it all. That's gross. Don't go to Iowa. Nope. But the point is that Al Capone, what did he get in trouble for? Because I'm doing a bunch of side anecdotes today. And I'm trying to weave it together for you so you kind of understand their issues. It's just how I am. But the point was that he was the kind of person who would have actually gone into the mall and said, you are not going to sell these kids. Get out of here. And he might have even shot some people over it. Or he would have literally shot Wilhelm had he seen him raping a woman. So he was a bad guy in the sense that he definitely ran alcohol legally that in the time of Prohibition. Narcotics. He was guilty of bribery. But you have to remember that there were a lot of officials that were actually down with him because they liked going to his clubs and they liked drinking and they liked jazz. And then he was guilty of a certain amount of prostitution running. And I have no idea how that went, but there was never any evidence of sex trafficking. It was just literally prostitution, which is legal in the U.S. You can't sell your body for sex to another person, right? So, and then there was also the fact that he was guilty of some narcotics trafficking as well during Prohibition, supposedly. That's from the FBI. I'm not sure I buy the narcotics part. But the problem was that he was basically an upper-class family man. And, he felt like the jazz and the alcohol went in one place. And this thing with the weird organs and the kids and the raping the dogs and all this other disgusting stuff was just really foul to him. And he had no problem just walking out with a gun and literally shooting those people dead if he caught him doing it. Broad daylight. And there were a lot of fights with people over turf. And he did get in fights with the Russian mafia because they are a lot more disgusting, more weird. It's like you get your jazz and illegal alcohol up here. This is the Russian mafia down here with the bizarre raping and the animal rape and the child rape and the organ trading and the whack out hard narcotic drugs like crank and the illegal use of fentanyl. That's the Russian mafia. They're like down here. And it's important to remember they run a huge economy and all of that still today, even though their actual traditional economy or what we call the accepted economies of the world, they're completely trashed these days. They don't have one. But that black market, that's the old phrase black market that offends people now, we call it off market or illegal market, illegal goods market, is thriving. So they are very clearly running. And they've actually gotten into some arguments in the U.S. recently with Niger. So, anyways, so the point is that I went through enough historical information that I came full circle and decided that Al Capone was not really that big a problem. That his stance on some of these really violent, obscene criminals was actually more acceptable than these other people. And where it was scary is that my confrontations with the FBI, they were still really angry at him and his presence or having existed, even though the man was dead. For almost 100 years, they were still angry about his life and existence, which showed me how much they had been embedded in that whole problem back in Iowa in the 80s. It still hasn't been entirely resolved. Easy to resolve. Shut down the weird fake agency front in California. Shut down the crazy fake consulting firm that's been stealing from the U.S. government that I've already detailed. Do the job. But, the FBI is not going to be the one to do it. It's surely going to have to be done by DHS, the Department of Labor, Defense Intelligence Agency, and the U.S. military at this point. So, this is a long show today. I'm going to sing an old song from the older film. I think it came out like 1989, and it was called Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's a really fun, old-fashioned tune, so I'm going to sing it right now. So, you had plenty money, 1922. You let other women make a fool of you. Why don't you do right like some other men do? Get out of here, make me some money too. You're sitting down wondering what it's all about. If you ain't got no money, they will put you out. Why don't you do right like some other men do? Get out of here, make me some money too. Now, if you had prepared 20 years ago, you wouldn't be wandering out from door to door. Why don't you do right like some other men do? Get out of here, make me some money too. Get out of here and make me some money. And that's all for the Thought Project, just so you know. Have a good one.